Would you still say yes if the whole courtroom believed your marriage was a lie? The question lingered in the silent chamber like a note that refused to fade. Every face turned toward the tall black father standing beside the woman in the ivory suit. Marcus Hayes didn't answer right away. His broad shoulders remained still, his warm brown eyes calm despite the weight of dozens of curious strangers staring at him. Beside him stood Charlotte Bennett, one of Boston's most respected corporate attorneys. Her platinum blonde hair rested neatly against her shoulders, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. Reporters filled the back rows. Associates from her law firm whispered behind polished folders. Even the courthouse clerk paused with a document halfway across the desk. Nothing about the pair standing together made sense to anyone watching. Marcus wore a perfectly fitted navy suit that somehow couldn't hide the quiet humility of a man more familiar with playground benches than luxury boardrooms. Charlotte looked every bit the attorney who had spent years dismantling billion-dollar contracts without raising her voice. They appeared to belong to different worlds, yet a marriage certificate rested between them. The judge lowered his reading glasses and studied both names again, as if hoping the paper had somehow changed. Mr. Hayes, Ms. Bennett, before we proceed, I need one simple answer. The room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus glanced toward the small wooden bench near the courtroom entrance. Sitting there with her legs swinging gently above the polished floor was his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. She hugged a faded blue backpack almost as big as she was. She smiled when their eyes met. Marcus smiled back, the same quiet smile that had carried her through scraped knees, unpaid bills, rainy mornings, and nights when pancakes counted as dinner because hope cost less than steak. Charlotte noticed the exchange. Something softened behind her carefully controlled expression before disappearing almost instantly. The judge repeated the question, "Is this marriage genuine?" A camera shutter clicked somewhere behind the crowd. Another followed. Nobody expected what happened next because Marcus didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He didn't look offended. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "Your Honor, have you ever met someone who changed your life before you even learned their last name?" Silence settled across the courtroom. The reporters stopped writing. Charlotte slowly turned toward him, surprised by words she had never heard him say before. The judge leaned back without replying. Marcus lowered his eyes for only a second, almost as if revisiting a memory no one else could see. 3 weeks earlier, he had been standing outside a neighborhood elementary school in Dorchester waiting for Lily to finish her science club. The October wind carried the scent of fresh coffee from a small bakery across the street, while orange leaves drifted across the sidewalk. His pickup truck, older than some of the teachers inside the building, sat patiently beneath a maple tree with more miles than pride left in its engine. It was an ordinary Wednesday, the kind of afternoon no one remembers. Or at least, that's what Marcus believed before a stranger's hurried footsteps, a leather briefcase slipping from careful hands, and one unexpected sentence quietly redirected the course of 3 very different lives. Marcus had always believed that ordinary afternoons carried the greatest surprises because nobody was looking for them. He stood outside the school fence with a paper cup of black coffee warming his hands while parents gathered in familiar circles, trading weekend plans and homework complaints. Lily had another 15 minutes before science club ended, so he watched yellow buses pull away one by one beneath the bright October sky. Across the street, a woman stepped out of a rideshare while speaking into a wireless headset. Her voice was steady, measured, the voice of someone used to solving impossible problems before lunch. She balanced a leather briefcase, a phone, and several folders at once, moving with the precision of a person whose schedule never allowed mistakes. Then the unexpected happened. A gust of wind swept across the sidewalk, lifting dozens of legal documents into the air like white birds escaping their cage. Papers scattered across parked cars, flower beds, and the front lawn of the elementary school. Several pedestrians glanced at the scene before continuing on their way. Nobody wanted to chase paperwork through afternoon traffic. Marcus handed his coffee to a nearby crossing guard without saying a word and started collecting pages before they disappeared beneath passing tires. He jogged calmly from sheet to sheet, smoothing bent corners with careful hands instead of rushing. The woman finally removed her headset and hurried toward him, clearly frustrated with herself. "Those files are confidential," she said, almost apologizing for the panic in her voice. Marcus nodded. Then we should make sure every page finds its way home. It was such a simple sentence that it caught her completely off guard. Most people would have asked questions. Some might have glanced at the company logo or searched for a reward. Marcus only focused on putting every document back in perfect order. Charlotte accepted the stack with both hands and counted the pages twice. Nothing was missing. Relief quietly replaced the tension in her face. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Marcus smiled. "Looks like your day just got a little easier." Before she could answer, the school doors opened and children poured outside in a wave of excited voices. Lily spotted her father immediately and ran across the sidewalk carrying a cardboard model of a small solar system. "Daddy, I got all the planets right." Marcus knelt beside her with genuine pride shining in his eyes. "I never doubted you for one second." Charlotte watched from several feet away. She had spent years studying witnesses inside courtrooms, learning to recognize rehearsed emotions from real ones. Nothing about Marcus looked rehearsed. His daughter wrapped both arms around his neck while explaining how Saturn kept losing one of its paper rings. He listened as though she were presenting the most important case in America. Charlotte found herself smiling without realizing it. Her phone buzzed sharply, breaking the quiet moment. The screen displayed 5 missed calls from her senior partner, followed by another urgent message. The family trust hearing had been moved forward. Failure was no longer an option. She looked back toward Marcus, wanting to thank him properly, but he was already helping Lily adjust the crooked planets on her project. Neither of them seemed interested in who she was or what her tailored suit represented. For the first time in years, Charlotte Bennett experienced something unfamiliar. She was simply another person standing on a sidewalk instead of the attorney everyone expected her to be. She never imagined that this quiet father would cross her path again, let alone become the one person every headline, every courtroom, and every whispered conversation would soon refuse to understand. If you are enjoying this story so far, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to Black Dad Destiny. Every day, we bring you touching stories, emotional love stories, and unforgettable journeys inspired by the moments that change people's lives forever. Charlotte barely made it back to her downtown office before the next crisis arrived. The conference room overlooking Boston Harbor was already full when she walked through the glass doors. Senior partners sat around the polished walnut table with expressions that carried more concern than confidence. Thick folders covered every chair. A digital screen displayed family trust documents worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Her managing partner, Edward Collins, wasted no time. "The hearing has been moved to next month." The opposing counsel found another angle. Charlotte placed her briefcase on the table without removing her coat. "What angle?" Edward slid a confidential report toward her. "They are claiming our client no longer represents stable family values. They want control of the entire estate." The room fell quiet. Charlotte read every page without changing expression, but one sentence refused to leave her mind. Married applicants would be viewed more favorably under the revised trust provisions because they demonstrated long-term personal stability. She looked up slowly. Since when does a legal argument depend on someone's personal life? Nobody answered immediately because everyone already knew the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes perception entered the courtroom before evidence did. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus finished replacing a faulty air conditioning unit inside a neighborhood bookstore. The owner thanked him with homemade cookies wrapped in wax paper. Marcus accepted one for Lily and politely declined the extra payment she offered for staying later than expected. "You already paid what we agreed," he said with the same calm smile that seemed impossible to shake. On the drive home, Lily talked nonstop about her science project while sitting in the back seat. "Miss Harper says we might visit the planetarium next month." Marcus smiled through the rearview mirror. "Then we should start saving for the gift shop because I already know you are bringing home another space book." Lily laughed. "Maybe 2. Their apartment was small but warm. Family photographs lined one shelf. A faded baseball glove rested beside children's library books. Marcus cooked grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup while Lily colored planets with bright markers across the kitchen table. There was nothing extraordinary about the evening, yet every corner carried a quiet peace that expensive homes could not always buy. Across the city, Charlotte unlocked the door to a luxury condominium overlooking the Charles River. Silence greeted her before the lights did. No family photographs filled the walls. No laughter drifted from another room. Only carefully selected artwork and furniture arranged with perfect symmetry. She placed her phone on the kitchen counter, removed her heels, and poured herself a glass of sparkling water. The apartment looked beautiful. It never felt alive. Her eyes drifted toward the school permission slip that had accidentally slipped into her briefcase, while Marcus gathered the scattered papers. Lily Hayes, Grade 2. Planetarium Field Trip. Charlotte stared at the cheerful drawing of a rocket decorating the top corner. A child had probably folded it into the wrong stack during the confusion outside the school. She smiled without realizing it. Before she could set it aside, her phone rang again. This time it was her aunt, Margaret Bennett, the trustee overseeing the family estate. Charlotte, the older woman said firmly, there is still one solution you continue to ignore. Charlotte already knew what was coming. I am not discussing my personal life tonight. It stopped being only personal when the future of your family foundation depended on it. Charlotte closed her eyes. I cannot marry someone simply because it looks good on paper. Margaret's reply came gently, almost sadly. Then perhaps you have not met the right person. Charlotte looked once more at the forgotten permission slip resting on her kitchen island. A little girl's careful handwriting. A father's last name. A completely ordinary family living an ordinary life. She could not explain why that small piece of paper felt heavier than every legal document waiting inside her office. But somewhere deep inside, an impossible idea had quietly begun to take shape. The next morning began with the kind of crisp autumn sunlight that made Boston look almost forgiving. Marcus dropped Lily off at school with the same routine. They never rushed. A high five before she climbed the front steps. A reminder to be kind. A promise that he would be waiting when the final bell rang. Do not forget your permission slip this time, he called with a grin. Lily laughed and waved the folded paper above her head before disappearing into the building. Marcus had barely returned to his truck when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Mr. Hayes, a calm female voice asked. This is Charlotte Bennett. We met outside Lily's school last week. Marcus immediately remembered the attorney whose papers had scattered across the sidewalk. Of course. Is everything all right? There was a brief pause. Would you have time to meet this afternoon? There is something unusual I would like to discuss. Marcus glanced at the service schedule on the passenger seat. 3 maintenance appointments. A water heater inspection. A furnace estimate. Bills did not pause for unusual conversations. Still, something in her voice sounded less like confidence and more like someone asking for help without knowing how. I can meet after 4:30, he replied. There is a coffee shop across from the public library. Thank you, Charlotte answered quietly. I will be there. All afternoon, Marcus found himself wondering what kind of legal issue could possibly involve a man who spent his days fixing heating systems. Meanwhile, Charlotte spent those same hours rewriting the first sentence she intended to say. Every version sounded colder than she wanted or stranger than she could justify. By the time she entered the small neighborhood coffee shop, she had abandoned every carefully rehearsed speech. Marcus arrived exactly on time wearing clean jeans, a navy jacket, and the same calm expression she remembered. He carried no briefcase, no expensive watch, only a worn notebook tucked beneath one arm. Thank you for meeting me, Charlotte said as they sat near the window. You sounded serious, Marcus replied gently. I hope everything is okay. Charlotte wrapped both hands around her untouched cup of coffee. For the first time in years, one of the city's most accomplished attorneys struggled to begin a conversation. I need someone I can trust, she finally said. Marcus smiled politely. That is a rare way to begin a legal meeting. She almost laughed. Almost. Then the smile disappeared. My family foundation is facing a legal challenge. It is complicated, but one part of the case depends on public perception. My aunt believes I need a husband. Marcus blinked once, unsure whether he had heard correctly. Charlotte continued before embarrassment could stop her. I do not need romance. I do not need appearances. I need someone honest enough that I could stand beside them without feeling ashamed. Marcus leaned back, studying her expression instead of her words. She was not manipulative. She was exhausted. Why are you telling me this? He asked softly. Charlotte met his eyes. Because last week you returned confidential documents without reading a single page. Because your daughter looks at you as though the world is still a safe place. Because when nobody was watching, you chose kindness instead of convenience. Silence settled between them. Outside, people hurried past carrying shopping bags and umbrellas. unaware that one impossible conversation was unfolding behind the cafe window. Marcus slowly shook his head. "Miss Bennet, I think you are asking the wrong man." Charlotte expected that answer. It still hurt more than she anticipated. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but I could not think of a better one." Marcus looked down at the photograph tucked inside his notebook. It showed Lily missing her front tooth, smiling beside a homemade birthday cake. He closed the notebook carefully. "My daughter comes first," he said. "Every decision I make begins with her and ends with her. I cannot invite confusion into her life." Charlotte nodded without arguing. "That is exactly why I hoped you would listen." Those words lingered long after the coffee had grown cold, because for the first time since losing control of her carefully ordered world, Charlotte realized she was no longer trying to win a legal case. She was trying to earn the trust of a man who could not be persuaded by money, status, or pressure. Marcus drove home beneath a sky painted with fading shades of orange and gray, but the conversation in the coffee shop stayed with him far longer than the sunset. He had repaired broken furnaces, leaking pipes, and aging air conditioners for nearly a decade. Problems usually came with tools and instructions. This one came with a woman whose entire future seemed balanced on a decision he could not explain to his daughter. When he opened the apartment door, the familiar smell of tomato sauce drifted from the slow cooker. Lily sat at the kitchen table surrounded by crayons, glue sticks, and cardboard stars. "Daddy," she said with excitement, "Miss Harper says parents can volunteer for the planetarium trip." Marcus smiled while hanging his jacket beside the door. "That sounds like a pretty important job." Lily nodded. "Will you come?" He looked at the calendar hanging on the refrigerator. Every workday already carried another appointment, another estimate, another bill waiting to be paid. Still, he answered without hesitation. "If I have to work until midnight afterward, I will still be there." Lily grinned and returned to coloring another bright blue planet. Later that evening, after she had fallen asleep with a science book resting across her blanket, Marcus quietly stepped onto the apartment balcony. The cool October air carried distant traffic and the faint whistle of a passing train. He reached for his phone, stared at Charlotte's business card for several seconds, then slipped it back into his wallet without calling. Across the city, Charlotte remained inside her office long after every assistant had gone home. The lights from neighboring buildings reflected against the floor-to-ceiling windows, while legal files covered her conference table in careful stacks. Edward Collins entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You are still here," he observed. Charlotte looked up with tired eyes. "So are you." He placed 1 cup beside her. "Did you find someone?" She remained silent. Edward understood enough from the silence alone. "Charlotte, this is not just about the trust anymore. The board is nervous. The press already smells a story." She folded her hands together. "I met someone." Edward raised an eyebrow. "And?" He said no. Edward leaned against the table without speaking. After a long pause, Charlotte surprised even herself. "He said no because of his daughter." Edward smiled faintly. "That is probably the strongest reason anyone could give." The following afternoon, Marcus arrived at Lily's school carrying a small paper bag from the neighborhood bakery. Thursdays meant cinnamon rolls if she had done well on her spelling test. As children streamed through the front entrance, Lily came running with another smile that somehow erased the weight of adult problems. "Daddy, look who came today." Marcus looked up. Standing beside the school entrance was Charlotte. She wore a simple navy coat instead of her usual courtroom attire, and in one hand she held the permission slip that had accidentally ended up inside her briefcase days earlier. "I thought this belonged to someone important," she said, kneeling to hand it directly to Lily. The little girl accepted it with both hands. "Thank you, Miss Bennet." Charlotte smiled warmly. "You are welcome. I heard you were learning about space." Lily nodded enthusiastically and immediately began explaining the difference between planets and dwarf planets with complete confidence. Charlotte listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions instead of pretending interest. Marcus watched quietly from only a few feet away. She was not performing. There were no cameras, no reporters, no judges. Only a busy school sidewalk and one curious little girl who felt completely comfortable talking to a stranger. Before leaving, Charlotte stood and looked toward Marcus. "I meant what I said yesterday," she told him softly. "Not because I need a husband. Because I believe your family deserves complete honesty." Marcus looked at Lily laughing beside them before answering. "Honesty is the easy part." Charlotte waited. Trust is the difficult one. She nodded once, accepting the truth without argument. But neither of them noticed that another parent standing near the parking lot had quietly recognized Charlotte Bennett from television and had already begun wondering why one of the city's most successful attorneys kept returning to the same ordinary school to speak with the same quiet father. By Friday morning, the quiet rhythm that had always defined Marcus's life began to change in ways he could not yet see. It started with something so small that most people would have ignored it. Two parents standing near the school entrance lowered their voices the moment he walked past. One recognized Charlotte from a television interview about a high-profile corporate case. The other glanced from Marcus to Lily and then back again with the kind of curiosity that often grows faster than the truth. Marcus noticed the whispers, but he chose not to react. Lily was talking about constellations again, proudly explaining that Orion would soon be visible in the evening sky. He listened with complete attention because, to him, her excitement mattered more than strangers' opinions. Across town, Charlotte faced a different kind of pressure. Her office phone rang before she had even removed her coat. Edward Collins stood outside her glass office holding a newspaper folded beneath one arm. "We have a problem," he said quietly. Charlotte looked up. "Another legal motion?" Edward shook his head. "Rumors." He placed the newspaper on her desk. Nothing had been printed yet, but a business columnist had posted an online article asking whether Boston's most eligible attorney had suddenly disappeared from several charity events because of a secret relationship. There was no evidence, only speculation. Yet speculation had a way of becoming headlines. Charlotte sighed softly. "Someone saw us." Apparently more than one person. Edward sat across from her. "The board members are already asking questions. Some believe this could actually help your public image. Others think uncertainty makes you vulnerable." Charlotte looked toward the city skyline beyond her office windows. "I never wanted my personal life to become another legal exhibit." Edward nodded. "Unfortunately, someone else has already decided it should." That afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at the small HVAC company where he worked. His supervisor, Frank Sullivan, motioned him toward the office with an uncertain expression. "You have a guest." Marcus stepped inside and found Charlotte waiting near the window, dressed simply in a charcoal coat with no trace of the polished courtroom presence the city recognized. Frank politely excused himself, closing the door behind him. Marcus folded his arms. "This is not exactly where I expected to see you." Charlotte smiled faintly. "I wanted to come somewhere that mattered to you instead of asking you back into my world." Marcus appreciated the gesture more than he admitted. "What happened?" he asked. Charlotte took a slow breath. "People have started asking questions." He remained quiet. "I thought they would eventually," he replied. "People usually do. It is getting worse faster than I expected." She hesitated before continuing. "If this continues, reporters will eventually discover Lily's school." Marcus's expression changed immediately, not with anger, with concern. "That cannot happen." "I know." Charlotte lowered her voice. "Which is why I came here instead of calling." For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The hum of air compressors echoed faintly from the workshop outside, while afternoon sunlight stretched across the office floor. Marcus finally broke the silence. "You told me honesty was important." Charlotte nodded. "It still is." "Then let me be honest." He looked directly into her blue eyes. "I am not afraid of gossip. I am not afraid of being misunderstood. But my daughter deserves an ordinary childhood. She did not ask to become part of anyone else's story." Charlotte felt the weight of every word. "Neither did you," she answered softly. Marcus looked away toward the workshop where co-workers laughed while loading equipment into service vans. Their lives continued without headlines or courtroom strategy. That simple normalcy suddenly felt priceless. Before Charlotte left, she reached into her briefcase and placed a sealed envelope on the desk. "Do not open it now," she said. "Read it after Lily goes to sleep." Marcus frowned slightly. "What is it?" Charlotte managed a small, tired smile. "Not a contract. Not an offer. Just the complete truth." She walked away before he could ask another question, leaving Marcus staring at the unopened envelope, completely unaware that inside were words capable of changing not only the future of Charlotte's case, but the future of his family as well. Marcus waited until the apartment had grown completely quiet before opening the envelope. Lily had fallen asleep with her astronomy book resting across her chest, one small hand still holding a blue-colored pencil. He gently pulled the blanket over her shoulders, switched off the bedroom light, and carried the envelope to the kitchen table. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window, and the old refrigerator hummed in the silence. Inside the envelope was not a contract, exactly as Charlotte had promised. Instead, he found a handwritten letter. The first sentence caught him off guard. "If you are reading this, thank you for giving me something nobody in my world seems willing to give anymore. Time." Marcus continued reading. Charlotte explained everything without hiding behind legal language. Her late grandfather had created a charitable foundation that funded children's hospitals, public libraries, and scholarship programs across New England. After his passing, control of the foundation became tied to a trust agreement that allowed a review of leadership under certain circumstances. Her distant relatives were attempting to remove her by arguing that she had built a successful career but failed to build a stable personal life, claiming she lacked the judgment to protect the family's long-term legacy. The lawsuit was not truly about money. It was about influence. If they succeeded, thousands of families who depended on the foundation's programs could lose support while the trust shifted toward private investments. Marcus lowered the letter for a moment. Suddenly, this was no longer a story about one attorney protecting her reputation. It was about children he would never meet, families who would never know his name, and opportunities that could quietly disappear. He resumed reading. Charlotte admitted she had spent weeks considering introductions arranged by friends, business partners, and wealthy families, but every conversation felt like another negotiation. Then she described the afternoon outside Lily's school. "You never asked who I was. You simply helped because someone needed help. I realized I trusted you before I even knew why." Marcus stared at the page for several long seconds. Those words felt heavier than any legal document he had ever seen. The next morning, he drove Lily to school in thoughtful silence. She noticed immediately. "Daddy, are you fixing a problem in your head?" she asked from the back seat. Marcus smiled softly. "Maybe." Lily leaned forward between the seats. "Miss Harper says the biggest problems are easier when nice people work together." Marcus laughed quietly. Children often reach the truth by taking the shortest road. After dropping Lily off, he remained parked beneath the same maple tree where he had first seen Charlotte gathering scattered papers. He read the letter one final time before reaching for his phone. Charlotte answered after the second ring. "Good morning. Can we meet?" Marcus asked. Of course. They met again at the same neighborhood coffee shop that afternoon. Charlotte looked exhausted, but hopeful. Marcus placed the folded letter carefully on the table between them. "You left one thing out," he said. Charlotte frowned slightly. "What did I miss?" Marcus looked directly at her. "You wrote about your grandfather, your foundation, the lawsuit, your family, but you never wrote about yourself." Charlotte lowered her eyes. For the first time since they had met, her carefully built composure cracked just enough to reveal the loneliness beneath it. "Because I was afraid that part would matter the least." Marcus slowly shook his head. "It matters the most." Before we continue, take a quick second to subscribe to Black Dad Destiny if you have not already. If you love powerful family dramas, surprising stories, real-life inspired journeys, and stories with meaningful life lessons, you are in the right place. Your support helps us create a brand new cinematic story every single day. Charlotte remained silent for several moments, watching the steam rise from her untouched coffee before she finally spoke. "After my parents died, everyone expected me to become strong overnight," she said quietly. "People admired the woman who could win impossible cases. They never noticed the daughter who stopped celebrating birthdays because there was nobody left to call first." Marcus listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that the greatest kindness was sometimes allowing another person to finish a sentence they had carried alone for years. Charlotte continued with a faint smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Success became easier than relationships. Contracts were easier than conversations. Courtrooms were easier than dinner tables." She looked out the cafe window where pedestrians hurried through another chilly Boston afternoon. "Then I met a father who treated a science project like it mattered more than any business meeting." Marcus glanced down for a moment before answering. "Because to Lily it does." Charlotte nodded. "Exactly." The silence that followed felt different now. It no longer belonged to two strangers trying to understand each other. It belonged to two people finally speaking without pretending. Marcus folded his hands together. "If I helped you, it would never be about protecting your image. I know. It would be about protecting the foundation your grandfather built and the families depending on it. Charlotte's eyes filled with quiet relief. That is all I ever hoped you would see. Marcus took a slow breath. But I have conditions. Charlotte leaned forward slightly. Anything reasonable. First, Lily knows the truth from the beginning. I will never ask my daughter to live inside a lie. Charlotte answered immediately. Agreed. Second, no matter what the newspapers say, no matter what your colleagues think, you never treat me like a public relations strategy. She nodded again. I promise. Marcus studied her expression carefully. He had spent enough years reading people inside repair shops, apartment buildings, and neighborhood homes to recognize sincerity when it appeared. Charlotte was not negotiating. She was asking. There was a difference. Third, Marcus continued. If this arrangement ever begins to hurt Lily, we stop immediately. Charlotte smiled for the first time that afternoon without restraint. That condition would have been mine too. Later that evening, Charlotte visited Marcus's apartment for the first time. She carried no expensive gifts, no flowers, and no carefully planned speech. Only a bakery box containing 3 slices of apple pie, because she remembered Lily mentioning that apples were her favorite fruit during their conversation outside school. Lily opened the door before Marcus could reach it. Miss Bennet, she exclaimed with genuine excitement. Charlotte smiled. I heard someone around here likes apple pie. Lily accepted the box with both hands as though it contained treasure. Within minutes, the 3 of them were sitting around the small kitchen table. Marcus poured milk into simple glasses while Charlotte helped Lily finish coloring the final stars on her planetarium poster. There was no awkwardness, no performance, only ordinary conversation about school projects, favorite books, and whether Pluto should still count as a planet. Marcus watched quietly as Charlotte laughed at one of Lily's jokes. It was a soft laugh, almost unfamiliar, as though it had not been used often enough. For the first time in years, Charlotte forgot to check her phone during dinner. The silence between conversations felt comfortable instead of lonely. As she prepared to leave, Lily looked up with innocent curiosity. Miss Bennet. Yes. Daddy says honest people always come back. Does that mean you are coming back too? Charlotte looked toward Marcus. Neither adult spoke. Some questions deserved patience before answers. Charlotte finally knelt until she was at Lily's eye level. I hope so, she said gently. If your dad thinks it is a good idea. Marcus met Charlotte's eyes across the quiet apartment. He gave the smallest nod, almost impossible to notice, yet it carried more meaning than any signature waiting inside a lawyer's office. Neither of them realized that across the street, a freelance photographer sitting inside a parked car had quietly lifted a camera after recognizing Charlotte's face, capturing a single ordinary moment that would soon become anything but ordinary. Marcus watched Charlotte disappear into the evening traffic before closing the apartment door behind him. Neither of them had noticed the camera across the street. Neither of them had seen the long lens quietly following every ordinary moment that was never meant to become tomorrow's headline. Inside, Lily carefully placed the empty pie box into the recycling bin. Miss Bennet is nice, she said with complete certainty. Marcus smiled faintly. She is. Lily looked up. Will she come back? He hesitated for only a second. I don't know yet, sweetheart. Children accepted uncertainty far more easily than adults. Lily simply nodded and returned to her homework, while Marcus stood by the kitchen window wondering why saying goodbye to Charlotte had felt strangely difficult. Across the city, Charlotte's phone began vibrating before she had even reached her condominium. 3 missed calls from Edward Collins. 2 messages from the firm's media director. Another from her aunt. She already knew something had happened. Edward answered before the first ring had finished. Don't go online, he said immediately. Charlotte pulled her car to the curb. Too late. Tell me. A long silence followed. Someone photographed you leaving Marcus's apartment. Charlotte closed her eyes. Edward continued. The photo is everywhere now. Nobody knows who he is yet, but reporters are already asking questions. Charlotte looked through the windshield without seeing the road ahead. And Lily? She asked quietly. Edward understood why that was her first question. Not yet. Relief lasted only a heartbeat. But it won't stay that way if this keeps spreading. The next morning, Marcus noticed the first reporter before he even reached the school parking lot. A dark sedan sat across the street. Another vehicle arrived 5 minutes later. Nobody approached him. Nobody needed to. They were waiting. Marcus's stomach tightened. He looked at Lily fastening her backpack. She was humming softly, completely unaware of the attention gathering around them. He knelt beside her. "Listen to me, Pumpkin. If anyone you don't know asks questions today, you tell your teacher immediately." "Okay." Lily frowned. "Did I do something wrong?" Marcus gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to behave." She smiled and hugged him before running toward the school entrance. Marcus remained where he was until the doors closed behind her. Only then did he turn toward the waiting cars. One reporter finally stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, are you engaged to Charlotte Bennett?" Marcus didn't answer. "Is your daughter the reason she's trying to change her public image?" Still, he kept walking. Another question followed. "Was your relationship planned before the foundation lawsuit?" Marcus stopped for the first time. He looked at the reporter with calm, unwavering eyes. "The only person you should leave out of your story is my daughter." Then he walked away. Less than an hour later, Charlotte received a phone call. She recognized Marcus's number immediately. When she answered, his voice remained calm, but quieter than she had ever heard before. "Charlotte," he said, "they've found Lily." Silence filled the line. "We need to talk. Today." Marcus arrived at Charlotte's office just before sunset. The reporters waiting outside turned the moment they recognized him, camera shutters snapping in rapid bursts, but he ignored every question. He had spent too many years teaching Lily that dignity was measured by the choices you made, not by the noise surrounding them. Charlotte was already waiting in the conference room overlooking Boston Harbor. She looked exhausted, not because of the headlines, but because she knew exactly why he had come. Before she could speak, Marcus placed a folded newspaper on the table. Across the front page was the photograph of the three of them outside his apartment. The headline read, Boston's most eligible attorney hides secret family. Charlotte lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded once. "I believe you are." The room fell silent. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "But apologies won't give Lily her privacy back." Charlotte looked at him steadily. "Tell me what I have to do." Marcus took a slow breath. "3 things." She listened without interrupting. "First, Lily never lies. If she asks who you are, we tell her the truth." Charlotte answered immediately. "Agreed." "Second, if we do this, nobody uses my daughter as a photograph, a headline, or a legal argument." "I promise." "Third." Marcus paused. "When this is over, if Lily asks you to stay in her life, that decision belongs to you, not to the contract." Charlotte's composure finally cracked. She had expected conditions about money, lawyers, or the media. She had never expected the final condition to be about a little girl's heart. "I can make that promise," she whispered. Marcus looked at her for a long time before reaching into his jacket pocket. He removed the unsigned agreement she had once prepared and placed it on the table. "I read every page." Charlotte remained silent. "The contract protects you," he continued. "It protects your foundation. It even protects me." He gently slid the document back toward her. "But it doesn't protect Lily." Charlotte slowly picked up a pen. Without reading another line, she crossed out 3 entire paragraphs dealing with publicity appearances and media obligations. Then she signed her initials beside every change before handing the papers back. "Now it does." Marcus studied the pages. For the first time since they had met, she had chosen to weaken her own legal position to protect his daughter. That told him more than any promise ever could. He picked up the pen and signed his name. Neither of them smiled. The moment was too important for celebration. The following morning they stood together inside the same courthouse where the story had begun. Reporters crowded every hallway. Lawyers whispered behind polished folders. The judge adjusted his glasses as he looked from Charlotte Bennett to Marcus Hayes. "One final question," he said. "Is this marriage genuine?" The courtroom became perfectly still. Marcus looked toward the gallery where Lily sat swinging her feet beneath the wooden bench, smiling with complete trust. Then he faced the judge. "Your Honor," he said calmly. "It began as an agreement. But somewhere between protecting a foundation and protecting a little girl, we stopped pretending." Charlotte reached for his hand without hesitation. "Everything he has told this court is true," she said quietly. The judge remained silent for several seconds before signing the final document. The sound of the pen touching paper echoed through the courtroom. Outside, reporters rushed to file their stories. Inside, Lily ran forward and slipped her small hand into both of theirs. Marcus looked at Charlotte. Charlotte looked at Lily. For the first time in many years, none of them were standing alone. Sometimes the family that changes your life is not the one you were born into. It is the one built, day by day, through trust, quiet courage, and simple acts of kindness that ask for nothing in return.